Welcome to another parent-teacher video lesson from the earlygiftedmanual.com, a free website for homeschooled children 3 to 7 years old and their parents that promotes and develops giftedness at an early age. I am Gary Blank, the creator of that site, and your host and facilitator for this video and all of the videos in my educational program. As the video lessons are designed to work in conjunction with the program on my website, I ask you to, at some point, click on the URL link in the description box below, and this action will take you to the earlygiftedmanual.com. By doing that, you will be able to put this lesson and all of the video lessons here on my channel in the proper context of the total program that I am presenting to you and your child. And now let's look at the 24-hour day in a little bit different way. And what you see here, I call a timeline. And I've made this time, as you can see, first of all, let me explain what I've done here. I've used a couple sentence strips. I've taped two together and written all of the 24 hours of the day, starting with 12 o'clock midnight here, going through to 12, and then of course it's a cycle, so it repeats and goes to 12, equally spaced, which is important, and like I said, this is called a timeline, and this particular timeline I'm going to call the 24-hour day timeline. So what have we done here? Well, we've already discussed that time is cyclic. It's a cycle. So what I've done is I've kind of taken that circle of time and I've taken out all the curves and made it into a line of one day, and that's how you can explain this timeline to your child. And it's just another approach you can take to aid in your child's understanding of just what a 24-hour day is and what it means. So this timeline is just another. It's a great way to reinforce what your child's already done with the analog clock. So let's see, where could we start with the timeline here? You can grab a pencil or a marker. I use a pencil because the marker is a little big. You may want to write a lot of stuff in here. So you can work with your child on this timeline. You might want to start like this. First of all, explaining to him exactly what the timeline is. You can say, well, there's midnight, and there's the morning hours, and then you're coming to noon, and there's the afternoon and the evening, and finally you're coming to midnight again, which is the end of the day. And then, of course, to start a new day, you go right all the way back over here. So maybe we should start by, labeling this midnight. And, of course, the other one over here, midnight. Noon here, and let's see, what else could we do? You could show him what AM and PM looks like. Draw a line right here and say all of this is the AM, all of these hours are the PM. And you could talk a little bit about, maybe the next step would be to write in what your child or you and your child are doing together at various times. For example, let's see, right here might be breakfast. Right here might be the park. Perhaps right here with noon is, maybe we'll write it up here as lunch. Let's see, and on. Maybe you and your child run out to the grocery store at 3 o'clock, or the library. So I'm just, obviously I'm just throwing out some examples here. Dinner at 6-ish. And you get the idea. You can fill in all the details. So you can go all the way through a day and kind of label what you're doing with your child. And of course, it's interactive. You want your child to be doing a lot of the writing, of course, and it's an interactive thing without a doubt. So you can fill in that kind of information. You could show him what the concepts of morning, afternoon, evening, and night might look like with what I call you can make a line like this. Let's see, morning. A lot of people say the morning starts at 6 and goes to 12, so you can make a little line like this showing that you're including all those hours. Say morning, and most people would agree the afternoon goes to 6. Afternoon. A lot of people say evening goes to one of these times, but let's just say this. Call this evening, and go back over here, the midnight to 6. Perhaps call this the night. So, as you can see, this is, you could, every once in a while, I would say, make one of these and go through it with your child, because it will really, really help his or her understanding of the cycle, the 24-hour day, and what happens during the day, and all the different vocabulary words, and the fact that then the day repeats itself over and over and over again. So let's see, what else could I add to this? I think that's about it. Have all our time words there, the AM, the PM, morning, afternoon, evening, night, and anything else you can think of you could add into this. And it's called the 24-hour, I'm going to call it the 24-hour day line, and it's a timeline. Now let me show you how to work with what I call the teaching clock. And why do I call it the teaching clock? Well, to begin with, I've taken off the transparent covering from the clock. That's not that hard to do. You should have no problem doing that. What else have I done? I've removed the batteries, because you're going to manipulate the clock hands with your finger. The second hand is removed. Why have I done that? Because 2 hands at this point will be hard enough, difficult enough for your child to deal with. The concept of seconds ticking around with these 2 hands is just not that important at this time. It can be added in a little later, and it's not that hard to take the second hand off of one of these clocks. That should be an easy job to do. So now we have what we call the teaching clock, and as you can see, there's also some numbers on these ticks, and we'll get to that just shortly. But first of all, let's talk about reading the hours on this clock. And of course, you can review that the shorter hand, the one that points to these large, bold numbers here, is the hour hand, and the longer hand is the minute hand, and it really goes past the hours and points to these ticks, what I call ticks, up here on the beyond the hour numbers. I think a good place to start would be right here. You can tell your child that on the analog clock, as you can see, the hour hand is pointing right to 3, and you know it is exactly 3 because the minute hand will be pointing straight up past the 12 to this tick here that's all the way on the top of the clock. And as you remember from what we did with the digital clock, that's called the O clock. So you could ask your child, well, what time does this clock say? And hopefully he or she could say it's 3 o'clock. And you can do a few more. You could go here and say, okay, what time is it now? And hopefully he'll say 4 o'clock. So do a few of those. And here's a very important thing to show your child, how these hands relate to each other. You could manipulate the clock, and you can make a joke about it. Tell her, well, I'm going to speed up time and show you how these hands work together. And you could ask her, well, what time is it now? And she'll say 4 o'clock. And you could say, watch, I'm going to take this minute hand and I'm going to move it all the way around, exactly one time around the circle. And watch this hand and tell me how far it goes and where it goes. So you can do that right now. And there you go. And hopefully she will say, well, look, it's 5 o'clock. So you can make that connection. As the minute hand makes a full revolution, 60 minutes on this clock, the hour hand advances to the next hour. And that's a very important concept for them to understand at this point. And of course, you've already reviewed a little bit that there are, in fact, 60 minutes in the hour. And now let's look at reading minutes. Let's see. Well, we can start here. When we're not on the hour. Well, as you can see, I've altered this clock somewhat. Actually, this is a great teaching clock because, as you can see, it was provided with these little reminders of how many minutes there are as you travel around the ticks by fives, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and so on. And I actually had to change these. As you can see, these two have been changed up here because this used to read 60, and that's confusing because it's actually, as you remember from practicing, writing out the time with your child, that's actually 00. This was marked 5, but it's actually 05, right? You need the 0 to hold as a placeholder. So I've changed those a little bit. And don't be shy. I mean, consider the clock you're using, your teaching clock, and if you have to write those in with a magic marker, these are usually paper, the faces, or some kind of cardboard, write it in. If you really can't write it in, well, I guess we'll get to that in a minute. I'll show you what you can do if you can't write these in. But this is very helpful when your child is learning how to tell time. So let's just try this one here. Let's say this is what the clock is saying, what time it is. And you could show your child, well, I know that it's 5:10, 5 hours and 10 minutes, or 5 hours and 10 minutes after the o'clock, you could say. And how do I know this? Well, look, the minute hand is pointing right to that tick, and the ticks, you start counting the ticks from here, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And of course, these wonderful numbers here give your child an orientation as to what tick it is, which is really nice. So, you know, this teaching clock is a real boon to getting your child started telling time without too much difficulty. All right, so that's 5:10. And of course, you can show her, I kind of didn't say this, you should show her that there in fact are 60 ticks that go around here, 60 minutes in an hour, and you say these numbers are just little helpers to remind you what tick you're at. Now, let's say it's not on one of the multiples of 5. Let's say it's here. And of course, this is going to make things a little more challenging. So you could, you'll probably have to model this. You can say, well, it's 5, And then, let's see, we've got 20. And now you can show your child that you have to count on 20, 21, 22. Let's say it's right there, 23. So it's 5:23. So your child finds the number previous to where the minute hand is and then counts on. And if you don't have numbers on your clock, if you can't do it for some reason, usually these multiples of 5 that are, of course, correspond to the larger hour numbers on the clock, they're usually in bold. The tick will be in bold or a little longer. So you will have to teach your child to skip count and then count on, which of course makes it a little more difficult. So they'd have to go 5, 10, 15, 20, 21, 22, 23. But hopefully you are able to write these smaller numbers in to help your child out. So let's see, maybe we should do another one here. And of course your child will get a big kick out of time flying like this. Let's go all the way around here. Here's a good one. And you could let your child have a shot at it. And of course, one thing you also want to tell her, that until the hour hand absolutely makes it to 7, it's always 6 something. And I'll show you a little more about that in just a second. So it's 6, and let's see, there's 45, and she counts on 46, 47. The time is 6:47, 47 minutes after 6. And one of the places that's, one of the things that's challenging for a child is when the time is like this. It's just maybe 2-3 minutes before the next hour. He's going to look and he's going to go, well, it's 7 o'clock. I mean, look, that hand is just shy of it, but he might think, well, it's 7 o'clock. And then he's going to say 7:58. And of course, that's not right because the hour hand would be way up here. So you have to show him that until it makes it right up to the 00 there, to the top of the clock, it's still 6 something. And now when it gets to the top of the clock, it's 7. And it will proceed through that hour. So that's a tough one. Trust me, I've worked with kids on the clock, and that one really throws them. But after a while, they begin to understand that. So make sure you run through that and point that out to them also, so they don't get confused. And I think you get the idea. So I'm just going to do two of them here. And of course, quiz your child every day. Manipulate the clock and do as many as you want of these until they can easily tell the time on the clock. And of course, you could have them write out the time if you would you'd like to do that. That would be good practice. So they tell the time and they write it out. So you kind of it's a 2-for-1 deal, I guess you'd say. And I guess the last thing I want to say about reading the clock is there's expressions, and we adults know them, like quarter past the hour, half past the hour, quarter till the hour. And in a lot of elementary school programs, they will introduce these even before the kids are counting the minutes, and I think that's totally wrong. That just confuses them even more. So I would say don't introduce those kinds of concepts like 12:30 or, well, 12:30 is a good one, but half past 12 or quarter till 3. Don't introduce those concepts until they can do the exercises we just did here and they're rock solid. And you could introduce them like this. Just say, well, here's a way a lot of people estimate the time or make it easier for someone to understand. You could say, well, some people call this 7:15, and others will say, well, it's quarter past 7. And of course, that's an estimate. It might be like 7:16 here, and they might say 7:15. So introduce that after they're good at really, they've really mastered reading the clock face.